The iron shackles bit into Adam Zeller's wrists as the guards led him through the packed courtroom, and he kept his chin high, even as he heard the gasps and whispers from the crowd that had come to witness his trial. He had known this day would come from the moment he had stood before the village elder and declared his intention to marry Grishka. But knowing it would happen and experiencing the cold reality of judgment were two entirely different things. The courthouse smelled of old wood and human sweat, and the late autumn sunlight filtering through the high windows cast long shadows across the assembled townsfolk who had traveled from 3 counties to see the man who had committed what they called an abomination. Adam's boots echoed on the wooden floor as the guards positioned him before the judge's bench. Judge Cornelius Hartwell sat elevated above the court, his weathered face impossible to read behind his steel-gray beard. The man had been presiding over frontier justice for 30 years, and his reputation for fairness was matched only by his reputation for harsh sentences when the law demanded it. Adam tried not to think about what sentence the law might demand for a human who had publicly married an orc woman. The bailiff read the charges in a monotone voice that seemed to drain all humanity from the words. Adam Michael Zeller, you stand accused of violating the purity laws of the Eastern Territories, specifically the statute forbidding matrimonial union between humans and non-human creatures. How do you plead? Not guilty, Adam said firmly, and the courtroom erupted into murmurs. The judge's gavel cracked against wood like a gunshot, silencing the crowd. Order, Judge Hartwell said, his voice carrying the weight of authority. Mr. Zeller, you understand that 7 witnesses have testified to observing your marriage ceremony to an orc female, conducted publicly at the crossroads near Millbrook Settlement. The evidence against you is considerable. I understand that people saw me marry the woman I love, Adam replied, meeting the judge's gaze without flinching. I contest that this constitutes a crime. The prosecutor, a thin man named Aldous Pike who had built his career on enforcing the old laws, rose from his seat with barely contained eagerness. Your Honor, the defendant admits to the act. The law is clear. Marriage between human and orc is not only illegal, but represents a threat to the moral fabric of our society. The purity laws exist to protect humanity from the corrupting influence of monster races. The purity laws are wrong, Adam said, and the courtroom exploded into chaos. People shouted, some in agreement but most in outrage. The judge's gavel worked overtime to restore order. Mr. Zeller, Judge Hartwell said when the noise finally subsided, you will speak only when addressed directly or given leave to do so. Do you understand? Adam nodded, jaw clenched. His eyes scanned the courtroom, looking for friendly faces among the crowd. He found few. His brother stood near the back, face conflicted and eyes downcast. His former neighbors from the settlement filled several rows, most looking at him with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. His own parents had refused to attend, sending word through his brother that they no longer claimed him as their son. But Grishka was not there. The guards had told him she was being held separately, awaiting her own trial. The thought of her locked in some cold cell made his stomach twist with worry. She had been through so much already. The prosecution may present its opening statement, Judge Hartwell said. Aldous Pike stood and addressed the courtroom with the practiced ease of a man who believed absolutely in his cause. Good people of the Eastern Territories, we are here today to address a crime that strikes at the very heart of what it means to be human. The defendant, Adam Zeller, did willfully and publicly enter into marriage with an orc, a creature whose race has been at war with humanity for generations. Orcs have raided our settlements, killed our people, and destroyed our homes. They are not like us. They cannot think as we think, feel as we feel, or love as we love. They are monsters, and the law recognizes this truth. By marrying one, Mr. Zeller has not only broken the law but has betrayed his own kind. The prosecution will prove beyond doubt that this marriage took place, and will argue for the maximum penalty prescribed by law: 10 years of hard labor and permanent exile from the Eastern Territories upon completion of sentence. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. 10 years. Adam had known the penalty was severe, but hearing it spoken aloud in open court made it real in a way it had not been before. He would be past 40 by the time he completed such a sentence, if he survived the brutal conditions of the labor camps at all. The defense may present its opening statement, the judge said. Adam's lawyer, a young man named Thomas Wenworth, who had taken the case more out of idealism than any hope of winning, stood nervously. "Your Honor, members of the community, my client does not deny that he married an orc woman. However, the defense will demonstrate that the purity laws are based on outdated prejudices rather than reality. We will show that orcs are intelligent, feeling beings capable of the same emotions and bonds as humans. We will prove that the marriage between Adam Zeller and Grishka of the Broken Axe clan is based on genuine love and mutual respect. And we will argue that no just law can forbid two thinking beings from choosing to spend their lives together." It was a noble speech, but Adam could see that it landed poorly with most of the courtroom. The prosecutor looked almost gleeful at how weak the defense sounded. The trial proper began with witness testimony. One after another, people from Millbrook and the surrounding settlements took the stand to describe what they had seen. Yes, there had been a marriage ceremony. Yes, it had been conducted by Elder Simmons, who had since been censured by the territorial church for performing the illegal ritual. Yes, Adam Zeller had publicly declared his love for an orc and stated his intention to spend his life with her. Laws be damned. Some witnesses spoke with sadness, like old Martha Greenfield, who had known Adam since he was a boy. "He was always a good lad," she testified, wiping tears from her eyes. "Kind to animals, helped his neighbors, never shirked his work. I do not understand what possessed him to do this thing." Others spoke with anger. "It is unnatural," spat Harold Venn, a farmer whose land bordered what had once been Adam's homestead. "My grandfather died fighting orcs in the border wars. My uncle was killed in a raid, and now this man spits on their memory by laying with one of those monsters. It makes me sick." Through it all, Adam sat silently, hands clasped on the table before him. His lawyer objected occasionally, but most of the testimony was simple fact. Yes, the marriage had happened. The question was whether it should be considered a crime. On the second day of the trial, the prosecution called their expert witness, a scholar named Dr. Pemberton, who had written extensively on what he called the orc problem. The man was elderly, with wild white hair and spectacles that magnified his eyes to an unsettling degree. "Dr. Pemberton," Aldous Pike said, "please explain to the court your research into orc biology and behavior." The scholar cleared his throat importantly. "I have spent 40 years studying the various non-human races that inhabit our world, with particular focus on orcs. My research conclusively demonstrates that orcs, while possessing a superficial intelligence, lack the higher brain functions that allow for true reasoning, abstract thought, and complex emotion. They are driven primarily by instinct and aggression. The notion that an orc could experience romantic love as humans understand it is scientifically impossible." Adam's hands tightened into fists under the table. His lawyer leaned over and whispered, "Stay calm. We will get our turn." "So you are saying," the prosecutor continued, "that any relationship between a human and an orc must necessarily be based on something other than genuine mutual affection. Precisely, Dr. Pemberton said. The human in such an arrangement is either deluded, mentally compromised, or responding to some form of magical influence. Orcs have been known to use crude charms and potions. It is possible the defendant has been ensorcelled. I have not been ensorcelled, Adam said loudly, unable to contain himself. The judge's gavel came down sharply. Mr. Zeller, you are out of order. Another outburst and you will be removed from the courtroom during your own trial. Do you understand? Adam nodded tightly, breathing hard through his nose. His lawyer put a restraining hand on his shoulder. When it came time for cross-examination, Thomas Wentworth stood and approached the witness stand with visible nervousness. Dr. Pemberton, you testified that you have spent 40 years researching orcs. How many orcs have you actually spoken with during this research? The scholar blinked. Spoken with. One does not speak with research subjects. One observes them. So you have never had a conversation with an orc. I have interviewed several orc prisoners of war under controlled conditions. Prisoners of war. Were they cooperative in these interviews? They were hostile and uncooperative, which merely confirmed their savage nature. Or perhaps they were frightened prisoners being interrogated by a member of the race that had captured them. Thomas suggested. Is it not possible that your research conclusions are based on observing orcs in the most stressful and unnatural circumstances possible? Dr. Pemberton sputtered. The fundamental nature of a creature does not change based on circumstances. Your Honor, I would like to call my next witness, Thomas interrupted. I call Grishka of the Broken Axe clan to the stand. The courtroom erupted into chaos again. People jumped to their feet, shouting. Some demanded that no orc be allowed to testify. Others simply wanted to see the creature that had ensnared one of their own. The judge hammered his gavel repeatedly, his face reddening with the effort of restoring order. This is highly irregular, Judge Hartwell said when the noise finally subsided. The defendant in a criminal matter cannot be called as a witness. Grishka is not charged with any crime, Your Honor, Thomas said quickly. She broke no law. Only humans are subject to the purity laws. She is not a defendant, but a witness to the character of my client and to the nature of their relationship. The prosecutor shot to his feet. Your Honor, this is outrageous. We cannot allow a monster to stand in a human court. She is an intelligent being asking to speak on her own behalf, and that of the man she married, Thomas said, his voice stronger now. If we deny her that right, we prove that this trial is not about justice but about prejudice. Judge Hartwell was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he said, "The witness may take the stand, but I warn you, Counselor Wentworth, this strategy may backfire on you badly." I understand, Your Honor. The guards brought Grishka in through a side door, and Adam's heart clenched at the sight of her. She wore simple clothes, not the shackles he had feared, but her green skin looked pale and her usually bright eyes were dim with exhaustion. Her small tusks protruded slightly from her lower jaw, and her pointed ears were pinned back against her dark hair in a sign of distress that only someone who knew orcs would recognize. She was tall and strong, broader in the shoulders than most human women, but she carried herself with a dignity that none of the angry whispers in the courtroom could diminish. Her eyes found Adam immediately, and something passed between them that needed no words. She had been afraid for him, as he had been afraid for her. But they were both still here, still fighting. Grishka took the witness stand and placed her hand on the holy book when instructed to swear to tell the truth. Her accent was thick, but her words were clear as she spoke the oath. "State your name for the record," the bailiff said. "I am Grishka, daughter of Gramash of the Broken Axe clan of the Northern Territories." And you claim to be married to the defendant. I am married to Adam, Grishka said firmly. He is my husband, I am his wife. This is truth. Thomas Wentworth approached the witness stand carefully, clearly aware that this was the most important testimony of the trial. Grishka, how did you meet Adam? She looked at Adam again before answering, and her voice softened slightly. It was winter. Bad winter. My clan had been driven from our lands by human soldiers. We fled into the mountains, but the snows came early and hard. Many died. I was separated from the others during a storm. I wandered for days, frozen, starving. I thought I would die. Then I found a cabin in the woods. Adam's cabin, Thomas prompted. Yes, his cabin. I was so weak I could barely stand. I thought perhaps I could find food, something to help me survive. But when I entered, he was there. I expected him to attack, to call for help, to try to kill me. Humans and orcs do not trust each other. But he did not do these things. What did he do? He gave me food, Grishka said, and her voice cracked slightly with emotion. He helped me to the fire. He brought blankets. He saw that I was hurt, and he cleaned my wounds and bandaged them. He saved my life, though I was a stranger, though I was an orc. Adam remembered that day as vividly as if it had been yesterday instead of 2 years past. He had been checking his traps in the forest when the storm had rolled in with terrifying speed. By the time he fought his way back to his cabin, the wind was howling and snow was falling so thick he could barely see 3 feet ahead. He had stumbled through the door, frozen and exhausted, to find an orc woman collapsed by his cold hearth. His first instinct had been fear. He had grown up on stories of orc raids and orc brutality, but the creature huddled on his floor had been so obviously dying that his fear had given way to something else. She was someone in need, whatever her race. His mother had always taught him that a person's measure was taken by how they treated those who could not help themselves. So he had built up the fire and shared his food and done what he could for her injuries. And over the days that followed, as the storm raged outside and they were trapped together in the small cabin, he had learned that everything he had been taught about orcs was wrong. How long did you stay in Adam's cabin? Thomas asked. The storm lasted 5 days, Grishka said. After it passed, I was still too weak to travel. Adam let me stay. He hunted for food for both of us. He talked to me. He asked about my clan, my family. He told me about his life. He treated me like a person. Did you develop feelings for him during this time? Grishka's green cheeks darkened slightly, and Adam realized she was blushing. I did not understand what I felt at first. I had never spent time with a human who was not trying to kill me. Adam was kind. He was patient. He had a good laugh. When I was finally strong enough to leave, I found I did not want to go. But you did leave. Yes. I knew I could not stay. My clan needed me if they had survived. And I thought Adam's people would come eventually, and if they found me with him, they would kill us both. So I left. I returned to my people. Did you see Adam again after that? Yes. 3 months later, he came to the borderlands looking for me. He asked other orcs if they had seen me. Many would have killed him, but some remembered that he had traded fairly with orc trappers in the past. They brought him to my clan's camp. Adam remembered the fear he had felt walking into that camp, surrounded by orc warriors who could have ended his life with a single blow. But the fear had been nothing compared to the need to see Grishka again. The winter months had stretched out endlessly, and he had thought of nothing but her sharp mind, her humor, the way she had hummed old orc songs while helping him prepare food. What happened when he found you? Thomas asked. I was shocked. I asked why he had come, why he had risked his life. He said he had to know if I felt the same way he did. I asked what way that was. He said he thought he was falling in love with me. The courtroom was silent now, hanging on every word. Even the hostile faces showed a grudging fascination with the story. "And what did you say?" Thomas prompted gently. "I told him he was a fool," Grishka said, and despite the circumstances, a small smile crossed her face. "I told him humans and orcs do not fall in love. I told him it was impossible, that our peoples were enemies, that there was no future in such feelings." He said he did not care. He said he would rather be a fool in love than a wise man who never took the chance. He asked if I would give him that chance. "And you said yes." "Not right away. I made him prove himself. Orc custom says that a mate must be strong, must be a good provider, must be brave. I set him tasks. I told him to hunt with our hunters, to help build our shelters, to defend himself in the fighting circle against our warriors. I thought he would fail or give up or realize how different we truly were. But he succeeded. He tried so hard," Grishka said, and now there were definitely tears shining in her eyes. "He was not as strong as orc warriors, but he was clever. He was not as good a hunter, but he learned quickly. He earned the respect of my clan, even those who did not approve of a human in our midst. And at the end of a year, when I could find no more excuses to push him away, I admitted the truth. I loved him too. I had loved him since those days in the cabin when he saved my life, but I had been too afraid to say it." "So you agreed to marry him?" "Yes." "We had a small ceremony in the borderlands, following both human and orc customs. We exchanged vows before witnesses from both peoples. And then we went to the crossroads near Millbrook, and we had a second ceremony in the human way, because Adam wanted his people to see that our love was real and true, and not something to be hidden in shame." The prosecutor stood abruptly. "Your Honor, this is all very touching, but it does not change the fact that a law was broken. The defendant can be as in love as he claims, but the purity laws exist for good reason. They protect the integrity of the human race. Do you love Adam?" Thomas asked loudly, speaking over the prosecutor's objection. "Yes," Grishka said immediately, her voice ringing through the courtroom. "I love him with all my heart. He is my husband, my mate, my chosen one. I would die for him." "Would you die for him, or would you kill for him?" It was a dangerous question, and Adam tensed, but Grishka's answer was steady and sure. "I would kill to defend him if I must, as any wife would defend her husband, but I would prefer to live for him, to build a life with him, to work beside him, to share his joys and sorrows, to perhaps one day raise children with him. I want what every person wants, human or orc: a home, a partner, a future of peace." Thomas turned to face the courtroom. "Your Honor, members of this community, you have heard from Dr. Pemberton that orcs are incapable of complex emotion or abstract thought. Yet you have just heard Grishka speak of love, of hope, of dreams for the future. You have heard her describe a year of courtship where she tested Adam's worthiness as a partner. You have heard her commit to defending him while also expressing a preference for peace over violence. Are these the words of a mindless monster, or of a thinking, feeling person?" The prosecutor was on his feet immediately. "Orcs are clever mimics, Your Honor. They can learn to parrot human speech without understanding its true meaning." "Then I would like to ask Dr. Pemberton to return to the stand and explain how an orc could convincingly mimic emotions she has supposedly never felt," Thomas said sharply. Judge Hartwell held up a hand. "That will not be necessary. I believe we have heard sufficient testimony on this matter. Counselor Winworth, do you have any other witnesses?" "Yes, Your Honor. I call Adam Zeller to the stand." The shackles were removed from Adam's wrists as he stood and walked to the witness stand. His hands tingled as blood flow returned to them. He took the oath and sat down, finally allowing himself to look directly at Grishka. She gave him a small nod of encouragement. "Adam," Thomas began, "you have heard the charges against you and the penalty you face if convicted. Before we discuss your relationship with Grishka, I need to ask you about your background. You served in the territorial militia, correct? Yes. 5 years, from age 18 to 23. I served on the northern border. And during your service, you fought against orcs. Adam's jaw tightened. This was the part he had been dreading. Yes, I fought in several engagements against orc war parties. Did you kill orcs during your service? Yes. A ripple went through the courtroom. Adam heard Grishka's sharp intake of breath, though they had discussed this before. It was different hearing it said aloud in a public forum. How do you reconcile that with your current marriage to an orc woman? Thomas asked. Adam took a deep breath. When I was in the militia, I believed what I had been taught, that orcs were monsters, that they raided our settlements out of pure bloodlust, that peace was impossible. I killed in combat, following orders, defending human territory. And I had nightmares about it for years afterward, even though I told myself I had done the right thing. What changed? Meeting Grishka changed everything. When I talked to her, really talked to her, I learned that the orc raids on our settlements came in response to human settlers pushing into their traditional hunting grounds. I learned that orcs have families, traditions, honor codes. I learned that they fight to defend their way of life, just as we fight to defend ours. The war between humans and orcs is not good versus evil. It is two peoples competing for the same resources, each seeing the other as the aggressor. So you believe your service in the militia was wrong? I believe the entire war is wrong, Adam said firmly. I believe that humans and orcs are capable of living in peace, of sharing the land, of treating each other with respect. My marriage to Grishka is proof of that possibility. We come from enemy peoples, but we found common ground. We found love. If we can bridge that divide, then others can too. The prosecutor was practically vibrating with eagerness to tear into this testimony. Judge Hartwell gestured for him to proceed with cross-examination. Aldous Pike approached the witness stand with the air of a predator moving in for the kill. Mr. Zeller, you testified that you served in the militia and fought against orcs. How many orcs did you kill? I do not know the exact number. 6, perhaps 7. And you expect this court to believe that you went from killing orcs to marrying one. That seems quite a dramatic transformation. People change when they get new information, Adam said. I spent 5 years fighting an enemy I had never really met, never spoken to, never tried to understand. Then I met one and everything I believed was challenged. Or perhaps you were ensorcelled, as Dr. Pemberton suggested. Perhaps this orc woman used some form of magic or charm to make you forget your loyalty to your own people. Grishka used no magic on me except kindness and honesty. Let me ask you something else then. You claim to love this orc woman. But can you really look at her green skin, her tusks, her alien features and feel genuine attraction? Or is this love you speak of really just pity, or guilt over the orcs you killed? Adam felt his temper flare, but he forced himself to stay calm. I look at Grishka and I see the most beautiful woman I have ever known. Not in spite of her orcish features, but including them. Her green skin reminds me of spring leaves. Her tusks are elegant. Her strength is breathtaking. And more than any physical feature, I see her mind, her spirit, her humor, her courage. That is what I fell in love with. How romantic, Pike said with dripping sarcasm. But let me ask you this, have you consummated this marriage? Thomas shot to his feet. Your Honor, that question is inappropriate and irrelevant. It is entirely relevant, Pike shot back. The defense claims this is a real marriage based on genuine love. But if the defendant cannot even bring himself to perform his marital duties with this creature, we have consummated our marriage, Adam said loudly, his face flushing red. Multiple times. Grishka is my wife in every sense of the word. The courtroom exploded into shocked whispers and gasps. Pike looked momentarily taken aback, as if he had not expected Adam to answer so directly. Judge Hartwell's gavel worked overtime again. "This is a circus," someone shouted from the back of the courtroom. "It is an abomination," another voice agreed. When order was finally restored, Pike pressed on. "So you admit to lying with a monster, to mixing your human blood with orc blood?" "I admit to making love to my wife," Adam said steadily. "There is nothing monstrous about it." Pike turned to address the courtroom rather than Adam. "You see, the defendant has admitted to the full scope of his crime. He has not simply gone through some symbolic marriage ceremony. He has defiled himself utterly. He has betrayed his species through the most intimate possible contact with a non-human creature. If we allow this to stand, what is next? Will humans start marrying goblins, trolls? Where do we draw the line? We draw the line at consent and mutual respect," Thomas interjected. "Adam and Grishka are both adults who freely chose to marry each other. They harm no one by their union." "They harm the fabric of our society," Pike said. "They undermine the laws that keep humans safe and pure. They set a precedent that could lead to the complete breakdown of civilization as we know it." Judge Hartwell held up a hand for silence. "Counselor Wentworth, do you have any further questions for your client?" "Just one, Your Honor." Thomas turned to Adam. "If you are convicted, you face 10 years of hard labor followed by permanent exile. Knowing that, if you could go back to that winter day when you found Grishka in your cabin, would you do anything differently?" Adam did not hesitate. "No. I would make every choice the same way. Meeting Grishka, falling in love with her, marrying her, these are the best things that ever happened to me. Whatever punishment this court hands down, it will not change that truth. She is worth any price." Grishka was openly crying now, and Adam wanted nothing more than to go to her to hold her, but the guards kept him in place. "The witness may step down," Judge Hartwell said. "Are there any other witnesses?" Thomas stood. "Your Honor, I have one more witness I would like to call. Elder Marcus Simmons." The old man who had performed Adam and Grishka's marriage ceremony shuffled to the stand with the help of a walking stick. He had been a respected spiritual leader in the borderlands for 40 years, known for his wisdom and compassion. His willingness to perform the illegal marriage had shocked many, and he had been stripped of his official authority by the territorial church. But he carried himself with dignity as he took the oath. "Elder Simmons," Thomas said, "you performed the marriage ceremony between Adam and Grishka, knowing it was illegal under the purity laws. Why did you choose to do this?" The old man's voice was soft but clear. "Because I have spent my life serving the divine, and I believe the divine speaks through love. I have performed hundreds of marriages over my years as an elder. I know the difference between a union born of convenience, lust, or obligation, and one born of genuine love. When Adam and Grishka came to me, I saw in them a love as pure and true as any I have witnessed between two humans. I could not, in good conscience, refuse to bless such a union simply because of the color of one partner's skin or the shape of their features. Were you aware of the consequences you would face? I was, and I accepted them. Some things are more important than maintaining one's position or staying comfortable. Sometimes we must stand up for what is right, even when the law says otherwise." The prosecutor declined to cross-examine Elder Simmons, perhaps realizing that attacking a beloved spiritual leader would not play well with the jury of public opinion, even if there was no formal jury in this trial. As the elder stepped down, Judge Hartwell said, "We will now hear closing arguments. Prosecutor Pike, you may proceed." Aldous Pike stood and delivered his closing with practiced fervor. He spoke of the importance of maintaining human purity and the dangers of allowing humans to mix with monster races. He cited ancient texts and historical precedents. He painted a picture of a future where the purity laws were ignored and chaos reigned. He argued that Adam, whatever his personal feelings, had committed a crime and must face the consequences, or else the law would be meaningless. Then it was Thomas Wentworth's turn. The young lawyer stood, and despite his obvious nervousness, his voice was strong. "Your Honor, I stand before you today arguing for something very simple: the right of two people to love each other. The prosecution wants you to focus on abstract concepts like purity and precedent, but this case is not about abstractions. It is about Adam and Grishka, two real individuals who found each other against all odds and chose to build a life together." He paused, gathering his thoughts. The purity laws were written in a different time, a time when humans and orcs were actively at war, when fear and hatred ruled the day. But times change. People change. Laws must change too, or else they become chains that bind us to the prejudices of the past. Dr. Pemberton testified that orcs are incapable of complex emotion, but Grishka herself proved that false with her testimony. The prosecution argues that Adam must be under some spell, but you heard the genuine emotion in his voice when he spoke of his wife. This is not enchantment. This is love. Thomas turned to face Judge Hartwell directly. "Your Honor, I am not asking you to overturn the purity laws. That is beyond the scope of this trial. But I am asking you to recognize that sometimes the letter of the law and the spirit of justice are not the same thing. Adam Zeller broke a law, yes, but he did so in order to honor a higher law, the law of love, compassion, and human dignity. Grishka is not a monster. She is a person. Their marriage is not an abomination. It is a testament to the possibility of peace and understanding between our peoples. I ask you to find that justice in this case means allowing these two people to continue the life they have built together." The courtroom was silent as Thomas sat down. Judge Hartwell was quiet for a long moment, his weathered face thoughtful. Finally, he spoke. "This court will take a recess while I consider the arguments and evidence presented. We will reconvene in 1 hour for my verdict." The wait was agonizing. Adam was taken to a small holding cell while Grishka was kept separately. His brother was allowed to visit him briefly, and the two men sat in uncomfortable silence for several minutes before his brother finally spoke. "I do not understand this, Adam, but I can see that you love her. I hope the judge sees that too." "Thank you, Aaron," Adam said quietly. It was the first time his brother had used his name rather than just calling him the accused since the trial began. It felt like a small victory. When the hour was up, Adam was led back into the courtroom. Grishka was brought in as well, and the guards allowed them to sit together at the defense table. Adam took her hand, not caring who saw. Judge Hartwell entered and took his seat. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. "I have presided over many difficult cases in my 30 years on this bench," the judge began, "but none have challenged me quite like this one. The law in this matter is clear. Adam Zeller did violate the purity laws by entering into marriage with an orc. The penalty for this violation is prescribed by statute. As a judge, my duty is to uphold the law." Adam felt his heart sink. The words sounded like a preamble to a guilty verdict. "However," Judge Hartwell continued, "the law must also serve justice." And after hearing the testimony in this case, after seeing the genuine affection between the defendant and his wife, after considering the arguments made by the defense, I find myself questioning whether the purity laws truly serve justice in this instance. A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge raised his hand for silence. The prosecution has argued that orcs are monsters incapable of human emotion. The evidence presented contradicts this claim. Grishka testified with eloquence and obvious feeling. She spoke of love, hope, and dreams for the future. Either Dr. Pemberton's research is flawed, or orcs are more complex than his theories suggest. I lean toward the latter conclusion. Adam squeezed Grishka's hand tighter, afraid to hope. The prosecution has also argued that allowing this marriage to stand would undermine society. But I ask, what kind of society are we building if we forbid people to love each other based solely on race? What does it say about us if we punish a man for showing compassion to a dying stranger? What precedent do we set if we declare that the law is more important than justice? Judge Hartwell leaned forward, his eyes serious. Mr. Zeller, I have one question for you before I deliver my verdict. You have heard the penalty you face if convicted. You have been given multiple opportunities throughout this trial to express remorse for your actions, which might have influenced me toward leniency. So I ask you now, directly and plainly, do you regret marrying Grishka? The courtroom held its collective breath. This was the moment that would define everything. Adam stood slowly, still holding Grishka's hand, and met the judge's gaze without wavering. No, he said clearly. I do not regret it, not for a single moment. Grishka is the best thing that ever happened to me. Marrying her was not a mistake or a crime. It was the truest, rightest thing I have ever done. And if loving her means I am a criminal, then I will wear that label with pride. Grishka stood beside him, tears streaming down her green cheeks, her tusks glinting in the afternoon sunlight. Judge Hartwell nodded slowly, as if Adam had confirmed something he had already suspected. Then I will tell you my verdict. Mr. Zeller, you did violate the letter of the purity laws. That is undeniable. However, I find that you violated an unjust law for just reasons. Therefore, I am declaring a verdict of not guilty. The courtroom erupted into chaos. Half the audience shouted in approval while the other half shouted in outrage. The prosecutor leaped to his feet, his face purple with anger. Your Honor, you cannot simply ignore the law. I am not ignoring the law, Judge Hartwell said, his voice cutting through the noise like a blade. I am interpreting it in light of justice, which is my sworn duty. The purity laws state that marriage between human and non-human is forbidden, with the implied assumption that such unions are harmful or exploitative. This case has demonstrated no harm and no exploitation. Therefore, I find that the law does not apply to this specific instance. That is a ridiculous interpretation, Pike sputtered. The law is clear. The law is what I say it is in my courtroom, counselor, the judge said firmly. You may appeal my verdict to a higher court if you wish, but in this venue my word is final. Adam Zeller and Grishka are free to go. Adam could not breathe. He turned to Grishka, saw the same shocked disbelief on her face, and then they were in each other's arms, holding each other while the courtroom dissolved into arguments and shouts around them. The guards moved to break them apart, but Judge Hartwell waved them off. Let them be. They have earned a moment of peace. Thomas Wenworth was grinning from ear to ear, looking as stunned as everyone else. Elder Simmons, still sitting in the front row, bowed his head in what looked like a prayer of thanksgiving. This is not over, Aldous Pike said, gathering his papers with shaking hands. I will appeal this verdict. I will take it all the way to the Territorial Supreme Court if I must. This perversion of justice will not stand. You do what you feel you must, Judge Hartwell said calmly. But until and unless a higher court overturns my verdict, Adam Zeller is a free man, and his marriage is recognized by this court as legal and binding. The judge's gavel came down one final time, and the trial was over. The aftermath was chaotic. Half the courtroom wanted to congratulate Adam and Grishka, while the other half wanted to see them driven from the territory. Adam's brother pushed through the crowd to embrace him, tears in his eyes. "I am proud of you," Aaron said. "I wish I had the courage to stand up for what I believed in the way you did." Elder Simmons approached as well, clasping Adam's hand warmly. "You are a brave man, Adam Zeller, and you, Grishka, are a remarkable woman. I wish you both every happiness." But not everyone was supportive. Harold Venn and several other settlers blocked their path as they tried to leave the courthouse. "You may have fooled that old judge," Venn spat, "but you have not fooled us. You are a traitor to your race, Zeller. And you, orc, you are an abomination. You are not welcome in this territory." "The judge said they are free," Aaron Zeller said, stepping between his brother and the angry settlers. "Leave them alone." "Or what? You will defend your orc-loving brother. Maybe you are a traitor too." Thomas Wenworth appeared with several town constables. "Mr. Venn, you are dangerously close to threatening violence. I suggest you and your friends move along before you find yourselves facing charges." Grumbling, the angry settlers dispersed, though their hostile glares followed Adam and Grishka out of the courthouse. Outside in the late autumn afternoon, Adam finally felt like he could breathe again. Grishka held his hand tightly, her eyes scanning the crowd for threats. "What do we do now?" she asked quietly. "We go home," Adam said. "We rebuild our life. And we prove that the judge was right to believe in us." But getting home proved more complicated than expected. Adam's old homestead had been burned to the ground by angry neighbors who had taken the law into their own hands before the trial even concluded. When Adam and Grishka arrived at the site 3 days later, all that remained were charred timbers and ashes. Grishka stared at the destruction, her jaw tight with suppressed anger. "They destroyed everything." "They destroyed our house," Adam said, putting an arm around her shoulders. "They did not destroy us. We will rebuild." "Where? Your people do not want us here, and if we return to my clan, you will always be an outsider." Adam looked at the ruins, thinking hard. There are other places. The far frontier beyond the settled territories. Land that belongs to neither humans nor orcs. We could homestead there, build a new place just for us. It will be dangerous. No law, no protection, just wilderness. We will have each other. That is all we need. Grishka turned to face him, her green eyes searching his face. "You really do not regret this. Losing your home, your standing in the community, the safety of living among your own people." I told the judge the truth. "I do not regret a single moment." Adam cupped her face in his hands. "You are my home now. Wherever we go, as long as we are together, that is where I belong." She kissed him then, fierce and passionate, and he kissed her back, pouring all his love and commitment into that embrace. They spent the next week salvaging what they could from the ruins and making preparations for the journey to the frontier. Adam's brother helped them, along with a few other settlers who had been moved by the trial or who simply believed in doing the right thing. Elder Simmons came by to offer his blessing and a small purse of coins to help them get started. "Where you are going, you will be pioneers of a new way of living," the old man said. "You will face many hardships. But you will also have the opportunity to build something truly special, a home where human and orc can live together in peace. Others will follow your example, I believe. You are planting seeds that will grow into a better future." On the morning of their departure, Adam and Grishka loaded their supplies onto a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 horses. They had food, tools, seeds for planting, and weapons for hunting and defense. It was not much, but it was a start. Aaron embraced his brother one last time. "Write to me when you can. Let me know you are safe." "I will," Adam promised. "Take care of mother and father. Tell them I love them, even if they cannot forgive me. Maybe someday they will understand. Maybe we all will." The journey to the frontier took 3 weeks of hard travel through increasingly wild country. They passed through the borderlands where human settlements gave way to neutral ground, then into territory that had never been fully claimed by either race. The land was beautiful in its untamed state, rolling hills covered in forest, clear streams cutting through valleys, mountains rising in the distance like ancient sentinels. They finally stopped at a place where a stream widened into a small pond, surrounded by meadowland that would be perfect for farming. A nearby forest would provide timber for building and fuel for heating. It was isolated, far from any established settlement, but it was theirs. What do you think? Adam asked. Grishka walked around the area slowly, taking it all in. It is good land, good water, good soil, good hunting. We can build a life here. Then this is where we stay. They spent the rest of autumn and most of the winter building a cabin. It was hard work, made harder by the weather, but they labored side by side, Adam's human cleverness combining with Grishka's orcish strength to overcome every obstacle. They felled trees and shaped logs. They built a sturdy foundation and raised the walls. They constructed a roof that would keep out the snow and rain. By the time the first serious snows fell, they had a small but solid home. Inside, by the fire on cold winter nights, they talked about their dreams for the future. They would plant crops in the spring, wheat and vegetables to sustain them. They would establish trade relations with both human and orc settlements, positioning themselves as a neutral meeting point. They would prove that the two races could work together, live together, love together. "Do you think others will come?" Grishka asked one night, her head resting on Adam's shoulder. "Others like us, human and orc couples who want to be together but cannot in their own lands." "I think so," Adam said. "The judge's verdict will spread. People will hear that somewhere, in some small corner of the world, it is possible to love across racial lines without fear of persecution. And some of them will come looking for that freedom. We could build a real settlement, a place where everyone is welcome, regardless of race." "That is a big dream. We have already accomplished impossible things," Grishka said, smiling up at him. "Why not dream bigger?" Spring came, and with it, new life. They planted their fields and watched the green shoots push up through the dark soil. Adam hunted deer and turkey while Grishka fished in the stream and foraged for wild plants. They worked from dawn until dusk, but it was satisfying work, building something with their own hands. In early summer, they had their first visitors. A young human man and an orc woman, traveling together nervously, clearly not sure what reception they would receive. They had heard rumors of a place where mixed couples could live openly, and had come to see if the rumors were true. "You are welcome here," Adam told them, and he saw the relief wash over their faces. The couple, who introduced themselves as Alvin Zimmerman and Grishka, stayed for a week, helping with the farm work and learning about the area. When they left, they promised to return with supplies and to spread the word that sanctuary existed for those brave enough to seek it. More came as the summer progressed. Some stayed, building their own small homes near Adam and Grishka's land. Others visited briefly, before moving on to find their own places in the wilderness. A small community began to form, a strange, hopeful community of humans and orcs who had chosen love over the prejudices of their respective peoples. By autumn of their second year on the frontier, there were 6 homesteads clustered around the original pond. The settlers worked together to bring in the harvest, to prepare for winter, to defend against the occasional predator or bandit. They celebrated together when Alvin and Grishka announced that Grishka was pregnant with their first child, proof that human-orc unions could produce offspring despite what the scholars claimed was impossible. Adam and Grishka became the unofficial leaders of this small settlement, not through any formal appointment but simply because others looked to them for guidance. They mediated disputes, organized work parties, and welcomed newcomers. The dream Grishka had spoken of by the fire that first winter was becoming real. In their third year, Adam woke one morning to find Grishka pale and nauseous, refusing breakfast. His heart leaped with hope and fear. "Are you sick?" he asked, feeling her forehead for fever. "Not sick," she said, and a slow smile spread across her face. "I think I am pregnant." Adam felt his world tilt. "Are you certain?" "Not certain yet, but I know my body, I know the signs." She took his hand and placed it on her stomach. "We are going to have a child, Adam." He pulled her into his arms, overwhelmed with joy and terror. A child, their child, half human and half orc, a living symbol of everything they had fought for. "I am scared," Grishka admitted. "What if something goes wrong?" Grishka's pregnancy was difficult. "What if human orc children are not meant to be?" "Then we will face it together," Adam said firmly. "But I believe our child will be strong and healthy. They will have your courage and my stubbornness. They will be perfect." Grishka's pregnancy was indeed difficult. She was sick often in the early months and exhausted as the child grew larger. The settlement's women, both human and orc, rallied around her, sharing advice and remedies. Elder Simmons traveled out to the settlement to offer his support and prayers. "You are creating something new in the world," the old man told Adam. "The first generation born to both peoples. They will inherit the strengths of each race and hopefully none of the prejudices. They will be the bridge that connects humans and orcs." The child was born in late winter, during a fierce snowstorm that trapped everyone in their homes. Adam served as midwife with the help of their neighbor, an orc woman named Grishka who had experience with birthing. It was the longest, most terrifying night of Adam's life, listening to Grishka's cries of pain and being able to do so little to help. But when the sun rose, he held his daughter in his arms, and all the fear vanished. She was small and perfect, with skin that was a soft olive green, tiny tusks just barely visible, and eyes that already showed signs of intelligence and curiosity. She had Grishka's dark hair and Adam's sharp nose. She was the most beautiful thing he had ever seen. "What should we name her?" Grishka asked weakly from the bed, exhausted but smiling. "Hope," Adam said without hesitation. "We should name her Hope, because that is what she represents." "Hope Zeller," Grishka said, testing the name. "Yes, that is right." News of Hope's birth spread through the settlement and beyond. She was not the first half-orc child born. Alvin and Grishka's son had been born months earlier, but she became a symbol nonetheless. Visitors came from human settlements and orc clans, curious to see the child born of two peoples. Some came with hostility, but most came with wonder. Judge Hartwell himself made the long journey to the settlement in early spring, bringing official documents that recognized the community as a legal township and granting them territorial status. "I had to fight the territorial council tooth and nail for this," he told Adam, "but they finally agreed. You have proven that humans and orcs can live together peacefully. The law must reflect that reality." "Thank you," Adam said, shaking the old judge's hand, "for everything. For believing in us when no one else did." "I did not believe in you at first," Hartwell admitted. "I thought you were either a fool or under some kind of spell. But when you stood in my courtroom and said you did not regret your choice, I saw the truth. Love is not constrained by race or species. It is the most powerful force in existence, and no law should stand against it." The judge spent several days in the settlement, meeting the residents and being charmed by baby Hope. When he left, he carried with him a letter from Adam to be delivered to his parents. Adam had written many such letters over the years, but they had never responded. He still hoped that someday they might soften. Life in the settlement fell into a rhythm. The crops grew each year. The community expanded slowly, and the children born to mixed couples began to outnumber the original adult settlers. Hope and the other half-orc children grew up in a world where their dual heritage was celebrated rather than hidden. They learned human farming techniques and orc hunting skills. They spoke both languages. They were the bridge Elder Simmons had predicted. On the 5th anniversary of their trial, Adam and Grishka stood on a hill overlooking the settlement. From their vantage point, they could see 20 homesteads, fields golden with wheat ready for harvest and children playing by the pond. Smoke rose from chimneys as families prepared evening meals. It was peaceful, prosperous, and beautiful. "You remember what the prosecutor said?" Adam asked. "That allowing our marriage to stand would lead to the complete breakdown of civilization." Grishka laughed, a deep, warm sound. "I remember. He was wrong. We did not break civilization. We built something better, a new civilization, one based on acceptance instead of fear. It is still small, still fragile. There are still those who want to destroy what we have built." "There will always be those people," Adam agreed, "but they get fewer every year. Our children will grow up and have children of their own. The next generation will find our story unremarkable, just two people who fell in love, and that will be the greatest victory of all." Grishka took his hand, lacing her green fingers through his human ones. "I have something to tell you." Adam looked at her, seeing the mischief in her eyes. "What?" "I am pregnant again." Joy flooded through him, just as strong as it had been the first time. "Another child. Another bridge between our peoples," Grishka said. "Another proof that love is stronger than hate." Adam pulled her close, looking out over the settlement they had built, thinking of the child growing inside his wife, of Hope playing somewhere below with her friends. He thought of his trial, of standing before the judge and saying he had no regrets. 5 years later, that was still true. Every moment of hardship, every sacrifice, every challenge they had faced had been worth it. "I love you," he said. "I love you too," Grishka replied. "Always." They stood there as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple, husband and wife, human and orc, founders of a new world where such distinctions mattered less than the content of one's character. Behind them, their home glowed warm with firelight. Below them, their community prepared for another peaceful night. And within Grishka, another child grew, another symbol of hope for a better future. The trial that had seemed like an ending had really been a beginning. The question the judge had asked, "Do you regret it?" had one answer then, and would have the same answer always. No, not for a single moment, not when he had found the truest love he could imagine, not when that love had built a community, not when that community proved that the old prejudices could be overcome. Adam Zeller had stood trial for marrying an orc publicly. He had been asked if he regretted it. He had said no. And every day since had proven that no to be the wisest answer he had ever given. Months passed, and Grishka's pregnancy progressed more smoothly than the first had been. She was stronger now, more confident, and her body seemed to adapt better to carrying a mixed-race child. The settlement's population had grown to include a human doctor who had been run out of his town for treating orc patients with the same care he gave humans. Dr. Wallace supervised Grishka's pregnancy carefully, fascinated by the medical aspects of human orc reproduction, but always treating her as a patient first and a research subject second. "The baby's heartbeat is strong," he told them after one examination. "And based on the measurements, I would estimate you are carrying a boy this time." Grishka placed her hand on her swelling stomach, smiling. "A son. Hope will have a brother." "What will you name him?" Dr. Wallace asked. Adam and Grishka exchanged a look. They had discussed names, but one had risen to the top of their list immediately. "Justice," Adam said. "We will name him Justice. The doctor nodded approvingly. Hope and justice. Good names for the children who will inherit this new world you are building. As spring turned to summer, preparations began for a significant event, the settlement's first formal wedding. Two young people who had been born in the settlement and grown up together had fallen in love. Neither was half orc. Instead, one was fully human and one was fully orc, but they had known each other since childhood and saw no barrier to their love. When they announced their intention to marry, the entire community rallied to support them. It is different for them, Grishka observed to Adam as they helped prepare decorations for the ceremony. They did not have to fight for their love the way we did. They grew up in a world where such unions are normal. That is what we wanted, Adam said. We fought so they would not have to. The wedding was held on a beautiful summer day, with both human and orc traditions incorporated into the ceremony. Elder Simmons, who had made the long journey once again, presided over the ritual. As Adam watched the young couple exchange vows, he felt a deep sense of satisfaction. This was proof that their sacrifice had mattered. This was the future they had dreamed of that first hard winter in their cabin. After the ceremony, as the celebration continued into the evening with music and dancing and feasting, Judge Hartwell appeared. The old man had not announced his visit, and his presence surprised everyone. "I hope I am not intruding," the judge said, approaching Adam and Grishka. "I was in the region on other business and thought I would stop by to see how your settlement is faring." "You are always welcome here," Adam said warmly, shaking the judge's hand. "Come, join the celebration." As they sat together watching the festivities, Judge Hartwell said quietly, "I wanted you to know that the Territorial Supreme Court has made a ruling on the purity laws. Prosecutor Pike appealed your case as he promised. The Supreme Court heard arguments last month." Adam's stomach clenched. "And they upheld my verdict," the judge said, and his eyes sparkled. "But they went further. They declared the purity laws unconstitutional, in violation of the Territorial Charter's guarantee of freedom of association. Marriages between humans and orcs are now fully legal throughout the Eastern Territories." Grishka gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. Adam felt tears prick his eyes. "It is over. The fight is truly over. The legal fight is over," Judge Hartwell said. "The cultural fight will take longer. There are still many who disapprove of such unions, but the law is now on your side. No one else will face trial for what you face trial for." Adam looked at Grishka, saw the same overwhelming emotion reflected in her face, and they embraced each other tightly. Around them, other settlers had heard the news and were beginning to celebrate. The music grew louder, the dancing more exuberant. "There is more," the judge said. "Your parents sent a message through me. They want to visit. They want to meet their granddaughter and to reconcile with you." Adam felt his breath catch. After 5 years of silence, after countless unanswered letters, his parents wanted to reach out. Do they mean it? Or are they just following the social pressure now that the law has changed? "I do not know their hearts," the judge admitted. "But I know they are getting older, and I think they regret the lost years. Whether you choose to welcome them is entirely up to you." Adam looked at Grishka. "What do you think? They are your parents," she said gently, "and Hope's grandparents. If they are willing to accept us, then we should give them that chance." He nodded slowly. "Tell them they are welcome. But make it clear that if they come, they must accept Grishka as my wife and Hope as their grandchild, fully and without reservation." "I will convey that message," Judge Hartwell said. The celebration continued late into the night. Adam danced with Grishka, her pregnant belly between them, and with 5-year-old Hope, who giggled as he spun her around. He looked at the faces surrounding him, human and orc, old and young, all united in joy. This was what he had fought for. This was what he had risked everything to achieve. 2 weeks later, a wagon approached the settlement. Adam's parents climbed down, looking older than he remembered, more fragile. His mother clutched a bag that he knew would be filled with gifts. His father's face was carefully neutral, but his eyes showed uncertainty. Grishka stood beside Adam, holding Hope's hand. The little girl looked up at her with wide eyes, sensing the tension. "Who are they?" Hope asked in her sweet, high voice. "They are your grandparents," Adam said. "From my side of the family." His mother approached first, and when she saw Hope, her carefully maintained composure cracked. Tears streamed down her face. "Oh, she is beautiful. She looks like you did at that age, Adam, around the eyes." "She has her mother's strength," Adam said, and there was a challenge in his voice. Would they accept that? His father stepped forward, looking at Grishka directly for the first time. "I owe you an apology," he said, his voice rough. "And I owe my son an apology. We were wrong. We let fear and prejudice drive us apart from our own child. We cannot get back the years we lost, but we hope you will let us be part of your lives going forward." Grishka studied him for a long moment, her orcish features unreadable. Then she said, "You are welcome in our home. But know this: I am Adam's wife. Hope is our daughter. The child I carry is your grandchild. If you cannot accept these facts with your whole heart, then it is better that you leave now." "We accept," Adam's mother said quickly. "Please, let us start again." What followed was awkward at first. Adam's parents moved carefully through the settlement, clearly uncomfortable with the mix of humans and orcs, but trying hard not to show it. They met Hope, who was initially shy but warmed up when her grandmother produced a beautiful handmade doll from her bag. They toured the homestead and saw the life Adam and Grishka had built. That evening, sitting around the dinner table in the cabin, Adam and Grishka had constructed with their own hands. His father said, "I was a soldier in the border wars. I saw terrible things. I did terrible things. For 40 years I have carried hate in my heart for orcs. But watching you today, seeing the way you are with your daughter, the community you have built, I realized that the hate was poisoning me. You were braver than I ever was, Adam. You chose love over hate. I am proud of you." It was not a complete healing. Years of estrangement could not be overcome in a single day, but it was a beginning. Adam's parents stayed for a week, and by the time they left, promising to return soon, Hope had bonded with her grandparents, and the first tentative bridges of reconciliation had been built. Justice was born in early winter, a strong, healthy boy with his father's eyes and his mother's green-tinted skin. The birth was easier than Hope's had been, and Grishka recovered quickly. Adam held his son, and felt the same overwhelming love he had felt with Hope, this fierce, protective need to give his children a better world than the one he had grown up in. "We did it," he said to Grishka as they lay in bed with the baby sleeping between them and Hope curled up at the foot of the bed, stubbornly refusing to sleep in her own room when her new brother was so interesting. "Did what?" Grishka asked, though she was smiling. "Everything. We stood up to prejudice. We won our trial. We built a community. We proved that love is stronger than hate. We have 2 beautiful children and a future full of hope." "You forgot something," Grishka said. "What?" "We are still here, still together, still in love. That is the greatest victory of all." Adam kissed her gently. "You are right. Everything else flows from that." The years that followed were full ones. The settlement continued to grow, becoming a town of over 200 residents by the time Hope turned 10. Trade routes were established with both human and orc settlements, and the town became known as a neutral meeting ground where the 2 races could interact peacefully. Young people from across the territories came seeking the freedom to love who they chose without fear of persecution. Hope and Justice grew up strong and confident, fully comfortable in their dual heritage. They learned to read and write from their father and the settlement school teacher. They learned to hunt and track from their mother and the orc families. They spoke both languages fluently and moved easily between human and orc cultural contexts. When Hope was 15, she announced that she wanted to travel to one of the major human cities to study law. "I want to be a lawyer like Mr. Wentworth," she said. "I want to fight for people who are treated unfairly." Adam was terrified at the thought of his daughter venturing into a city where prejudice still ran strong, but Grishka said, "She is strong. She can handle it. And the world needs to see that half-orc children can be scholars and lawyers, not just settlers and farmers." So Hope left for the city, and she thrived there. She faced discrimination and hostility, but she also found allies and mentors. She graduated top of her class from the Territorial Law Academy and returned home briefly before taking a position with the Territorial Justice Department, working to enforce the anti-discrimination laws that had been passed in the wake of Adam's trial. Justice took a different path. He was more interested in building and creating than in law or politics. He became an architect, designing homes that incorporated both human and orc architectural principles. His designs became sought after across the territory, and he traveled widely, always returning home to the settlement between projects. As Adam and Grishka entered their 40s, they watched with pride as their children made their marks on the world. The settlement they had founded had become a symbol of possibility, proof that the old barriers between races could be overcome. Tourists came from distant territories to see the place where the famous trial's defendant had built his life. Some came to gawk, but most came to learn. On the 20th anniversary of their trial, the territorial government declared a holiday in honor of Adam and Grishka Zeller. Representatives from both human and orc governments attended a ceremony at the settlement, now officially named Haven. Judge Hartwell, now retired but still sharp at 80 years old, gave a speech about justice and courage. Elder Simmons, frail but still alive, offered a blessing for the continued peace between races. 20 years ago, Judge Hartwell said to the assembled crowd, I asked a young man if he regretted marrying an orc woman. He said no, with such conviction that it changed my understanding of what justice means. Adam and Grishka Zeller have spent the last 2 decades proving that love is stronger than prejudice, that courage can change laws, and that 2 people determined to live their truth can transform society. We honor them today not just for what they did, but for what they inspired in the rest of us: the courage to question unjust laws, the strength to stand up for what is right, and the wisdom to choose love over hate. Adam stood with Grishka, their hands clasped together as they had been for 20 years, and looked out at the faces in the crowd. His parents were there, fully reconciled now and doting on their grandchildren. His brother Aaron was there with his own family. Hope was there, taking time off from her work in the capital. Justice was there with his partner, a human woman he had met while working on a building project. Thomas Wentworth was there, now a respected judge himself. And scattered throughout the crowd were dozens of mixed-race couples and their children, living proof that Adam and Grishka's sacrifice had created lasting change. You regret it, Grishka whispered to him, echoing the judge's question from so long ago. Adam looked at his wife, the love of his life, the woman who had been worth every moment of hardship and struggle. Her green skin was beginning to show fine lines. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, but she was as beautiful to him as she had been that first winter in his cabin. No, he said, just as firmly as he had said it in the courtroom 20 years before. I do not regret a single moment. That night, as the celebrations wound down and the visitors departed, Adam and Grishka walked through Haven, greeting neighbors and friends. They stopped at the small memorial that had been erected at the center of town, a simple stone marker listing the names of the original settlers, who had taken the brave step of building a life together, despite the prejudices of their respective peoples. "We started something that will outlive us," Grishka said quietly. "Our children will carry it forward," Adam agreed, "and their children after them. Someday, the idea of forbidding humans and orcs from marrying will seem as absurd as the purity laws seem to us now." They returned to their cabin, the original structure now expanded and improved, but still fundamentally the same home they had built with their own hands. Inside, the fire crackled in the hearth, casting warm shadows on the walls. They sat together in comfortable silence, needing no words to express what they felt. Adam thought back to that day in court, standing before the judge with his future hanging in the balance. He remembered the fear, the determination, the absolute certainty that Grishka was worth fighting for. He remembered the moment when Judge Hartwell had asked that crucial question, and he had answered from the depths of his soul. "You regret it?" "No." 20 years later, with a lifetime of love behind him and hopefully many more years ahead, that answer remained unchanged. He had stood trial for marrying an orc publicly. He had been asked if he regretted it. He had said no. And he would say no again every day for the rest of his life, because Grishka was his heart, his home, and his truest love. In the flickering firelight, Grishka rested her head on his shoulder, and Adam wrapped his arm around her, holding her close. Outside, Haven slept peacefully, a testament to the power of love to overcome prejudice, of courage to change laws, and of two people who had refused to let society dictate who they could love. The trial had been an ending and a beginning. The question had been simple but profound. And the answer, that single, unwavering no, had changed everything. Not just for Adam and Grishka, but for everyone who came after them, everyone who benefited from the path they had blazed. As the fire burned low and they prepared for bed, Adam took one last look around their home, filled with memories of 20 years together. On the mantel sat a copy of the judge's verdict from their trial, framed and preserved. The words were familiar, he had read them countless times over the years. But one section always stood out to him, the part where Judge Hartwell had written, "Love is not constrained by race or species. It is the most powerful force in existence, and no law should stand against it." Those words had set them free. Those words had given them permission to build the life they wanted. And those words would echo through the generations, reminding future couples that love, real love, was worth fighting for. Adam climbed into bed beside Grishka, and she curled against him as she had every night for 20 years. "I love you," he whispered. "I love you too," she replied. "Always." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, two souls who had found their match across impossible barriers, who had stood firm in the face of judgment, and who had built a legacy of love that would endure long after they were gone. The trial was over. The question had been answered. And the life they had fought for continued, day by day, moment by moment, one expression of love at a time. Adam Zeller had stood trial for marrying an orc publicly. The judge had asked if he regretted it. He had said no. And in that no, he had found everything that mattered: love, family, purpose, and a future brighter than he had ever dared to imagine.